Welcome to the Kings Beat podcast. I am James Ham, your Kings insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Joining me, Mr. Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast, Kings Herald, the Kings Beat. He's doing all kinds of things. He's wearing multiple hats right now. What's going on, Brenden?
Not too much, James. I'm doing good, man. I forgot to wear the hoodie. I wore it yesterday, and it's extremely comfortable. Fire and Ice Kings Beat hoodie. Finally got my way.
That's right.
There's proof that it exists now. I do believe you.
There you go. There was a time where I literally handed it to you, but then it got left in the car and it's a long story. It's a long story. Okay, so let's just cut through like a bunch of really random stuff here at the beginning of the podcast. Number one, I've written Sunday musings every single week up until this last weekend. Sometimes I think there's twice where we had games on Sunday and I had to push it to Monday musings. I did not write Sunday musings this week because I'm still going through like a bunch of weird medical stuff. And so because I've said in the beginning, this is Kings coverage with a personal touch. I'll just tell you, Brenden knows I have blood clots in my left leg and I've been working through it. But they're traveling now, and so I don't know if any of you out there have ever had blood clots. They are really, really painful and unfortunate. And basically, it's like a golf ball moving up my left leg, like under the skin. So not very pleasant. I'll be put on blood thinners later today. I should be fine. There's nothing to be worried about, and blood tests and stuff like that. But I just want to be honest with you people because I never miss writing Sunday musings, and I didn't do it this weekend. So sitting down is not the best thing for me at this point. Laying down is. But Brennan's seen me like limping around the arena. I almost missed a game because of it, but I don't miss games. I haven't missed one in 10 years. I might miss my trip to New Orleans to go to the Final Four next weekend, but that is in the hands of a vascular surgeon at this point. So, just like to be honest and forthright with the good people that follow the Kings Beat. Outside of that, everything's fine. I feel totally healthy and everything else. Let's get to the business side. We've got the Off the Record with the Kings Beat Virtual Happy Hour, Part 4, Infectious Disease Control on Thursday evening from 5:30 to 7:30. The legendary Scott Moak will join the show. I am so excited about that. That is going to be a ton of fun. If you're not a premium subscriber to the Kings Beat, you will not get an invite. It is for premium subscribers only. But awesome stuff, and I can't wait for that. I'm assuming Brenden will be there. I'm hoping Brenden will be there.
That's the plan.
That's the plan. Brenden will be there. That's the plan. Outside of that, the Fire and Ice t-shirts are like flying off the shelves. So there's a promo code down below if you're on the YouTube. In the description, there's also a promo code if you get the email for 15% off the Kings Beat merch shop. Like I've been spending a lot of time packing up stuff, writing personalized notes to all of you, and sending out merchandise. So thank you to everyone who's jumping on board with the merchandise. It's a lot of fun, actually. I enjoy like having a giant stack of packages and walking into the post office and sending them out. It's a lot of fun. Outside of that, happy Tuesday, everybody. The season is winding down. I think we have, Brenden, do we have 9 games left?
9 games, and at least 5 of them without Domantas Sabonis.
At least 5 of them without Domantas Sabonis. Okay, so before we jump in, because that's where we're starting right now, is with Domantas Sabonis. If you are watching on YouTube, give us a thumbs up right down below. And subscribe to the Kings Beat podcast here on YouTube. That always helps us. Subscribe wherever you're listening to your podcast. Give us a rating and review. That helps us with all of those things. But we've crested 1,000. We're on our way to 1,100 subscribers here on the YouTube channel, and so good things are happening. Like Brenden said, Sabonis. Brenden, when you saw him going down, when you saw him laying on the baseline, what was your first thought?
It was just holy crap, is he not going to have any progress this offseason? But, watching the replay, it looked very uncomfortable, but the replay wasn't like horrifying, like something would be where a guy is out for months because of some knee issue. And then to kind of see him get up on his own free will and walk around and even attempt to play again right after, which only lasted, maybe 20 seconds before he realized it wasn't going to happen and ended up going back into the locker room. But I thought that was a good sign. But there definitely was a quietness that went around Golden One Center that was probably a little bit of fear.
Yeah, I think everybody, like the collectively holding their breath with him laying down on the baseline, grabbing his left knee. Sean Cunningham was sitting next to me, and luckily my guy Sean had his camera rolling through the entire play and had a pretty good view, and it really just looked like he took knee-to-knee contact on the inside of his left knee, and it didn't wobble. He didn't like tear an ACL or an MCL or mess up his patella tendon or anything else. It's probably just, I mean, the team is saying it's just a bruise on the left knee. He's not traveling on the trip, and look, I think that there's a possibility that Sabonis probably would have been out like a game or two in a normal situation, but this isn't a normal situation. It's final stretch run of the season. He's going to miss the entire trip. And I'll also throw in this other thing that I think maybe people have already forgotten. Domantas Sabonis' wife had a baby like last weekend. So this is actually going to be a moment where, look, we're coming to the end of the season. These games do not matter for the Sacramento Kings. Actually, they do. Losses matter more than wins at this point in the season. And I think it's good that Sabonis is going to take it easy and watch from afar and heal up the right way. He will be reevaluated in 10 days, which is after the trip. And that means that he is likely going to be eligible to play in the last 4 games of the season. But I'm just going to say, I'm not sure that we will see Sabonis again this season. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. Where are you at with that?
Yeah, that's fine by me. Like, I wouldn't, the only reason that I saw in actually like having Sabonis out there is for him to get some chemistry with De'Aaron Fox primarily, and maybe some of these other guys like DiVincenzo or Davion Mitchell, Harrison Barnes, but primarily Fox, and Fox wasn't available these last couple games either. We'll have to see what goes on with that hand that was in a brace when we saw him at the last game, held my memory here, against the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, the Kings aren't in a position where they're going to get the 10 seed. They're not mathematically out of it yet, but they're pretty much as close as you're going to get. And meanwhile, the Pacers just ended up beating the Portland Trailblazers. So now the Kings are sole owners of the 5th best odds in the draft lottery by half a game compared to Indiana. But they're only 3 games ahead, or I guess behind, of the Portland Trailblazers, who sit in 7th. Like, that race is more important for the Kings right now in this final 9-game stretch than it is chasing some ridiculous dream of a play-in tournament. So we've talked a lot about how there needs to be big change this offseason, how there needs to be another big substantial move, and the best asset they could possibly work with is a high draft pick. So it's fine by me. I don't mind Sabonis taking some time to kind of get settled into Sacramento, to deal with get to go through the birth of the raising of his first child. And yeah, this is more than fine by me.
Yeah. Okay. So you brought up a couple of things there. We might as well dive into. You know what? Let's push back the race for the 5 towards the end of the pod, because we're going to discuss some of the happenings over the weekend with the teams in the round of 32 and the Sweet 16. Which I think were a lot of fun. Well, now we're heading to the Sweet 16, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. This week is the Sweet 16, the Elite 8, and then next weekend is the Final 4 and the final, and then the championship. So let's just wait on that stuff, and we're gonna bust into right now. What does it mean? Sabonis is out. He's not traveling. I have yet to get confirmation on whether Neemias Queta Let me check my phone before I say that. I have yet to get confirmation on whether Neemias Queta will in fact travel with the Kings to Indiana. But if he does not, that means that they walk into that game with Damian Jones and Alex Len, and maybe Trey Lyles can play a little bit of center, but they're a little soft at the position after having like 47 centers on the roster the entire season. This is a moment where Damian Jones is going to get a chance to a chance to start the rest of the season, and then B, where I think Neemias Queta could get like substantial minutes. Like I would be comfortable with Queta and Jones splitting, playing 24 minutes each, and let's give Queta a shot here and see what he's got. He's played extremely well at the G League level. He just keeps putting up big games. A couple of nights ago, he had 29 and like 7 or 8 and a couple of blocks. He played yesterday and had another solid line. His rebound numbers aren't great, but on the season, I think he's around 17 points, 8.5 rebounds, a block and a half. And I would like to see what he can do in extended minutes.
I would too. I think that this is a good opportunity to get him a little bit of run. I do think that it would be weird. I would enjoy it, but it would be weird if he was getting play over Alex Len. And Len just fully has been sitting on the bench all year long then at that point, but I would understand it, and it would make sense to me to go with some Neemias minutes, or even splitting between the two, I think is more than reasonable with the rotation they'd be working with, like you said, of D. Jones, Len, and Queta. I think there's room for all three of those guys to be playing on a nightly basis, and I think that that's kind of the type of things that we have to look for in this final stretch of games. Like, I'd love for Davion Mitchell to go into the offseason with some positive momentum and a sense of confidence because he's playing well. I mean, we just saw him have a career night in that loss against Phoenix where he just was doing everything on both ends of the floor. It goes into overtime, and he ends up logging 46 minutes, but then you also get a career-high 28 points. 9 assists is a career high for him. So I think that it's going to be those type of things going through the final stretch of games here for the Kings.
Yeah, it's the Kings are in an awkward spot, right? Because last season, when it got to this point in the season, they had DaQuan Jeffries, they had Justin James, they had Kyle Guy, they had maybe DaQuan was let go around this time. There we have it. Breaking news here on the podcast. Neemias Queta will be on the trip. There we go. Confirmation. Right. So that is exciting news. And look, that's what this season should be about. This point in the season should be about. But the Kings don't have any young players. Like, it's the strangest thing I've ever seen. This team always has like a glut of young players, and when they waived Lou King, that took away another young player. They did not fill that two-way spot. I would think that they would at least consider filling the two-way spot. Bring up a Matt Coleman or bring up a Emmanuel Terry. Just give yourself a different look, or go sign someone else from some other team and bring them into your system. But I think there's also a danger that the Kings have a couple of second-round picks, and they probably don't want to extend a 2-year two-way contract at this point to somebody, even though you can waive two-way players with no problems, as we already saw that. So the point is, like, normally you would hand this part of the season off to a bunch of young guys and say, go ahead and do your thing. The Kings have Josh Jackson, who's really not that much of a prospect anymore. He's not that young, and he's on the verge of not being in the league anymore. So it's Davion at 23 going on 24. It's Chimezie Metu, who turned 25 today. Happy birthday, Chimezie Metu. It's Damian Jones, who's 26. It's Neemias Queta, which I think Nemi is like 22. We don't have like this glut of young players. Jamias Ramsey is no longer with the Kings. Robert Woodard is, who is actually like 24 as well. He's no longer with the Kings either. So this is a weird situation because there are going to be veterans that have to play, and that's not what usually the plan is at this point in the season. You brought up the Fox thing. Do you think we've seen the last of Fox?
I think it would make a lot of sense if we have.
Yeah.
I don't see much especially if Sabonis isn't going to be available, like I don't see much of a point in putting De'Aaron back out there. Like prior to the injury, he'd been playing some of the best basketball we've ever seen in his career, and just kind of let him go into the offseason. Riding off that, I mean, I don't know. I think that we could still see him, but I certainly see a good argument for just shutting it down.
Yeah, I can also see that argument. And I think it's going to come down to Fox a little bit. There's been some gray area here with the Fox injury. I've been told that like he was looking forward to playing in Indiana against Buddy Hield and Tyrese Halliburton. That, they had circled that. And I think Sabonis was looking forward to it too. I think you get a reality check when you see your 6'10", 6'11" center, literally like the franchise is laying there on the ground, and it's that moment where you're like, okay, maybe we shouldn't play these guys when in meaningless games at the end of the season just to build chemistry. We got to see the chemistry. Now let's just kind of shift gears. So I think it's also possible we've seen the last of Fox. I'm not totally positive on that. But I do know that there is some confusion over what's actually happening in his hand, and like we've heard things, but like it doesn't matter how many times I ask, whatever I've heard has been refuted, and like that's so. When it comes to what the injury actually is in his hand, Alvin Gentry keeps saying that it's it's the amount of pain he can deal with, right? Like it's a pain tolerance issue. And I mean, that could still mean that he has something wrong in the hand, and they're just not telling us. But I know that like the inside of his palm is all swollen. It's why he turned the ball over 9 times that one game against Milwaukee, right? Yeah. He had 4 turnovers in the last like 2:47 of the game because he just had no zip left on his pass, and
in the entire second half of that game, he's clenching his hand, shaking it, like he's clearly in a lot of discomfort. Yeah, with that right hand, the entire second half of the Milwaukee game. So, yeah, I mean, I've heard that it's worse than pain management, but we're gonna, I guess, see how this goes. But to me, if there's any sort of risk, like why, you don't need to add on to it.
I'd even say
running him out there.
Not even if there's any sort of risk, like what's the point? Like at this point, like we just talked about it, you don't have like a bunch of young players to turn to. The one young player you do have to turn to that you want to build something for this summer is the guy you brought up, like Davion Mitchell. And I think, like I've said it from the beginning of the season, I watched Davion play. He's not a natural point guard. He can become a natural point guard, but like in his rookie season, he was not going to be a third distributor for this team. That's not who he is as a player. Some games he has 6 assists, other games he has 0 assists, and never once looks for a teammate at all. Like he only looks to get his own shot, and that's okay. Like I don't have any problems with the way I've seen Davion play all season long, but he can really use this time to say, okay, running a team. This is what running a team looks like. And go out there and share some duties with Dante DiVincenzo. I think it also, at this point, if you're going to start Davion, then and Fox isn't going to play, then that means that DiVincenzo really does probably have to come off the bench for you the last 9 games of the season because you're going to need him to be the backup point guard. I guess you could work out rotations differently, but I kind of feel like that's probably what we're going to do. We no longer have to see Dante DiVincenzo with De'Aaron Fox because De'Aaron Fox likely won't be there. So I think we just have a lot to kind of mull over. I think the Indiana game is going to be a huge point where we understand where this thing is going completely. Who's going to play, who's not, right? And if the Kings lose that game, it is so tremendous in the standings. It's like the biggest gift of all time. And again, we'll get to all that later in the pod. But like you brought up the Davion moment. What was it that you liked about Mitchell when he started and played major minutes against the Suns and put up career highs across the board? And the Kings battled and fought and were like really, really scrappy.
I think like Alvin pointed out, like him doing it on both ends of the floor. Davion, that is, being asked to guard Booker on the other end. While, I mean, 46 minutes in an overtime game, but 46 minutes is like Davion looked gassed while he was out there. He really was not giving much break. He was running the team. Like you said, I think that this is the best playmaking I've seen from him. I've been really impressed all season long at his ability to create space off the bounce. He hasn't capitalized on it amazingly throughout the entire season, but obviously he did in that Phoenix game. He's got a really quick kind of step back, but he's not even quite stepping back. He just stops his momentum very well and quickly, and he finishes around the rim pretty well. I got pretty excited when he almost threw it down over, I want to say it was JaVale McGee.
JaVale.
Yeah, he like, forget that Davion has bounce like that. We saw at a practice earlier this year, I think when Tyrese was still around, it was Ty and De'Aaron both giving Davion a hard time about like, come on, man, we've seen you dunk like that. Like, I've seen the high school clips, and it made me pull it up. And yeah, Davion can get up there, and he's been messing around a little bit more in warm-ups and things like that. And yeah, we got a little glimpse of that, so I thought that was a fun moment, even though it didn't go down. But it's just something you pointed out to me at the beginning of the year was, I was like, man, I really like Davion. And you're like, well, I haven't seen it all in one game. Like, you've seen bits and pieces of it in different stretches, but this was the first time where it was like, okay, this is all of it together.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because he either scores or he doesn't. He either assists or he doesn't. Some games he doesn't score and doesn't have assists. Some games he has a bunch. Like, it's never the same thing, right? And I think the one thing that you expected out of him was consistency, and the 3-point shot one day is like spot on. And his 3-point shot is so refined, and he should be a 40% 3-point shooter at the NBA level, between 38 and 40. I'm almost going to guarantee that's where he's going to settle in for his career, because it's a like repeatable motion. He absolutely is refined with almost everything that he does. I think, again, I keep saying this, there are moments where he looks just like Ty Lawson to me, where he's just bouncing around the key, moving in and out like so fast, so quick. You talked about his ability to stop. The stop and pop is nuts. Like, he can stop on a dime and pull up, and he gets to like 15, 16 feet. There are nights where like that's not happening because he's worn himself out and his legs aren't there. And so I think that's something he's got to get through. But this is the natural progression of a rookie. They come into the league, they struggle early on trying to figure out the pace and the speed of the game. They settle in and they start having a good stretch for like 15 games. Then they hit the rookie wall and it looks like someone hit him in the head with a frying pan. And you're like, oh no, like, so you got to get through like these 7-game stretches where they can't hit shots, and they get frustrated because they can't hit shots, and they forget about defense, or they start turning the ball over. And then you have this breakthrough moment where they're back and they have, maybe 15 or 20 games where they're really solid. Well, then we get to like, hey, look, we're now at game 60 and we've doubled up your longest season at the college level. And they hit a wall again. And then you watch them start to climb over that wall. And I think right now we saw, even if you look at last year, look at Tyrese Halliburton, it was like this the whole season. Like, he was really, really good, and then he'd fall off. And then really good, and you watch him build. And then he got late in the season, he started to really start rolling again, and then he got hurt, right, with the knee injury. Well, with Davion, we're going to see the same thing. Like, this is okay. This is what rookies do, and I'm totally fine with it. And now we're seeing him start to build, and that's usually what you see. When rookies get a really solid burn in the last 20 games or 18 games or 15 games, you start to see them string things together and say, okay, this is who I can be. You see the adjustments. You see them be able to start setting up teammates, which we saw the 9-assist game from him. And then he started to exploit advantages. The fact that he scored the game-tying bucket in overtime, like, that was spectacular, Brenden. This is what you need for this kid. It's like, if De'Aaron Fox doesn't play, he almost shouldn't play, just so Davion can learn to be the guy for a stretch and give him that confidence walking into the offseason.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a coincidence that both times we've seen Davion be in a groove, and maybe this Phoenix game, he's got to keep it up in order for it to actually, I guess, be a groove rather than just one outlier game. But the last time we saw him in a rhythm was when De'Aaron was also not out there. And it's less of De'Aaron specifically and more of just Davion getting to be in that starting lineup. And I think there being a clear understanding of like what his role is on that night. And I think that defining that going into next year is going to be important. We saw this a little bit with Tyrese even last year, where he was kind of in and out of the starting lineup. And so I think that there is an aspect of like Davion feels like a rhythm player sometimes. Like sometimes he just feels like he's not in a rhythm, that he's still trying to get his footing or figuring out where am I going to impact the game today? And I think that it's just going to be more defined throughout the stretch of this season, and that seems to help him. I think that helped him in those 10 games prior to the All-Star break earlier this year. I think it's something like we've kind of heard Dante talk about, where he is rehabbing from injury, and there's a lot of other complications to Dante DiVincenzo's process right now. But he talked about how last year, at all 66 games that he played for the Milwaukee Bucks, he started. And there's just a comfort to being in the starting lineup. Everybody takes a second to get going, and you get to be out there for that process of everybody else. And when you're coming off the bench, like you're expected to be ready to go right away. You're going in alongside guys who have had a second to get a flow and feel of this game. And I think it's just a little bit of a different aspect for Davion, where his role hasn't been that defined throughout this season. And now he's going to know exactly going into that night, this is what they need from me. And I think that's helpful. And it's also going to be something that they're going to need to define going into next season.
Yeah. Okay. So on the season, I'm gonna Davion Mitchell's played a lot. He does have somewhat of a defined role now. Whether it's as a scorer or as a distributor, like there could be some question marks about like what exactly is he supposed to do? Is he supposed to be an on-ball guy? Is he supposed to be an off-ball guy? I think we're seeing that he's probably more comfortable as an on-ball guy, but he's always going to have to learn and like refine who he is as an off-ball guy, because that's just who he's going to be at the NBA level. I don't think he's going to be a 20-point-a-game guy and just like rocket, go crazy, and all of a sudden he's this guy that you've got to build an offense around. But over his last 5 games, he started twice. He's 31.8 minutes per game. He's averaging 15 field goal attempts a game and shooting 46.7, 5.4 3-point attempts per game. He's hitting 44.4. He's averaging 17.8 points, 3.8 assists, 2.2 rebounds, a steal. He's only turning the ball over 2.2 times per game in 32 minutes, which is excellent. Although his assist to turnover ratio is a little skewed. He needs to get the assist numbers up. And he's staying in the game, 2.4 personal fouls per game. Now, like on the season, his numbers don't look that good. But what we're seeing now is like he's got the keys to the car, right? Now, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to do like license to drive and get the car stolen and bring it back in the middle of the night all crushed? Is that what's going to happen? That Les Anderson, that you have no idea what I'm talking about, because you're like, that movie was before you were even born. Corey Haim isn't even with us anymore. But License to Drive, you need to watch License to Drive, Brenden. Noted. Yeah, it's in that it's at the back end of like the great John Hughes films. So Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink. I don't know. There's so many great movies. Like that genre of film is incredible. So you need to go back and watch all of these things. Anyway, to get back to where we're at, yeah, when someone hands you the keys, like, what are you gonna do with it? Like, are you gonna ding it the first day out, or are you gonna take advantage? Are you gonna like find your lane, not drive too fast, not go tune assisted driving cat and drive the franchise off a cliff? Are you going to be able to handle yourself? And so far, I think Mitchell's showing like he's a mature, steady hand. And we get the joy of interviewing him in post game, and he's not bad, but he's very short. So all of his answers are probably like 15 words or less, right?
Oh yeah, he looks like he's like been trained on like how to deal with media.
Yeah, sometimes he gets to the end, he's like, Yeah. Okay. Like, I'm done with that one. Let's go to the next question.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, but it's usually short and like staccato. It's very like blah, 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 blah. I'm done.
He's tough to get anything out of.
He is, and I thought initially Sabonis was the same thing, but no. Sabonis is short, but it's brilliant. You're like, oh my goodness. Like, you go to transcribe, you're like, oh, that was some next level stuff, Brenden. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a lot more emotion with Sabonis.
There is, and if I was writing like post game, like sidebars, like I did for years and years, I would be really intrigued because there's always a quote or two from Sabonis, and like we had this incident. I'm just gonna bring this as a totally bizarro, but we had this situation the other day where, like, I went to go set up in the media room for post game, which usually we have like at least a 10-minute wait before Alvin Gentry comes in. And like I'm setting up so I use a mini tripod that I leave set up, and on my mini tripod I have a phone accessory that will hold my phone, and then I use a Rode mic with an adapter for my Apple phone. So Rode mic is a directional mic. It's like this little cone that sticks out, and that's how I do pre and post game or scrums or practice or anything else. And with our phones now, it's just absolutely crazy what you can do, what you can shoot, how quickly I can edit, how quickly I can square cut it so people can't square cut it after I put it up and cut my logo off. I can watermark it. So it's crazy. So I go to set up my camera, which is literally just putting my phone in, tightening it up, and plugging in the audio. And Sabonis is already on the stage. And I'm like, what is happening here? I'm like, and they're like, okay, are you guys ready? Brendan's not even in the room.
No,
like
I went to go get water. I had already been down there, went to go get water, reopened the door, and he's up there answering questions. The media relations guys just looked at me and shrugged. And I'm like, what the hell is this? Okay.
So 5 minutes after the game, Sabonis is in the media room talking. Sabonis leaves, and then who came in next? Was it Alvin that came in next?
Alvin, and then we did wait a second for Dante that night, I think.
Maybe
it wasn't Dante. I think we got Justin, and then we were out of there really quick.
We were out of there within 25 minutes. So like I posted something on Twitter saying, "Oh my gosh, Sabonis just like 5 minutes after the game, he's already talking. This is new in Sacramento." And someone was like, "Well, it seems like a stupid thing to complain about." And I'm like I wasn't complaining. I was like, "This is a miracle." And he's like, "No, you're complaining because you have to wait for players." Brenden will attest. Waiting for players is like waiting at the DMV. It is boring and lame, and you're waiting while somebody sits in an ice tub in another room that you can't see, and you're like, this is it literally it's like waiting for a bus that never shows up, right?
This last weekend when I had March Madness games to turn on while I'm waiting, it was way better. But the point where we're sitting there feeling a need to watch something while we're waiting for some of these guys, sometimes it's yeah, you need to entertain yourself. We're in there playing games with the other media guys, trying to guess whoever comes out what they're about to wear, and
the De'Aaron Fox do-rag game. That's one of our games. We all choose a color. What color De'Aaron Fox is gonna, and De'Aaron's like in on it now. He thinks it's hilarious. Yeah, it's I like, in all honesty, we wait on any night that De'Aaron Fox has a good game, which he had a bunch of good games. We wait an hour to an hour and 20 minutes. So when a game ends at like 9:15 and we're waiting until 10:35 for Fox to show up, and then we get him for like 8 to 10 minutes, now you're looking at like almost 11 o'clock just with him talking. Like, and if you had to write afterwards, which I did for years, you're looking at like 1 o'clock in the morning, you're leaving the arena. So yes.
A lot of times we're trying to make it to Yard House by the time they lock their doors at 11. There's been times that we haven't.
That's right. There are plenty of times where we do not make it out of the media room until after 11. So anyway, that was hilarious. And to me, it was
Davion got us the second time. last night against Phoenix, or not last night, but the last game against Phoenix. He was out really quick. Also, some guys were not there yet.
It's almost like they haven't been doing a lot of like conversation after the game, like or they send a guy out and then he comes back and he joins the conversation. And they're already kind of like, let's get one out of the way to try to get the media taken care of, the first media person, and then we'll send Alvin out like 10 to 15 minutes later. I remember, I think it was the Phoenix game where Alvin came out and you could tell he was frustrated. Like he was a bit red in the eyes and like it had taken a toll on him. That game had. But again, Davion was out there super quick and was like absolutely spectacular. I mean, I fully enjoyed watching him and like, okay, if this is who we can get, maybe if you can like have some your consistency level is up here, and then on occasion have spikes like this, then that's totally fine. Then you're a really solid number 9 pick in the draft.
Yeah, I'm been happy with what we've seen from Davion. I'm liking seeing what feels like a little bit more confidence. Doesn't feel like the right word, but willingness to kind of step up and make it his moment every once in a while. And yeah, I think I've been impressed. You know, one of the main things is that 6 of 6 from the free throw line against Phoenix. Like, he's been a poor free throw shooter this year. He hardly gets to the line. I want to say he's under 1 a game. He never gets to the line. He shot it poorly from the line in college as well. Yeah, he's at 0.9 free throws per game on 59%.
Ooh, 59.3.
And he went 6 of 6 against Phoenix.
That's interesting because I watched him the other day. I recorded him make 48 consecutive free throws. He's not a bad free throw shooter. And again, everything he does it's like slightly mechanical, but it's so repeatable. It's his same exact motion with everything that he does. Like, he's so incredibly refined. And I guess maybe that's because he's a 23-year-old guy coming into the league. I mean, that plays a role in it. Is he 23? Yeah, 23 and 198 days. So definitely a 23-year-old. Yeah, again, that's what these moments are about. It's about focusing on that and nothing else. Like developing a young player or 2 or 3. I want to see. Let's kind of get back to the Neemias thing. First of all, we skipped over this. Since the last podcast, Rashaan Holmes has decided to shut it down for the rest of the season and leave the team. He is not with the Kings, from what I can tell. He has some personal issues that he's trying to take care of, and he's worn out. And I think more than anything else, I think love and support is what that guy probably needs. This was a brutal season, and not only did he have injuries and really weird injuries, but also COVID, and he had a death in the family. He also had, the moment where he lost his job because they traded for a 25-year-old 2-time All-Star. This has been a tough stretch. So nothing. And Rashaan Holmes, just so people know, he's like a really cool dude. He's very, very nice guy behind the scenes. Good teammate, heart and soul guy. Losing him as a teammate is actually a pretty tremendous blow at this point, as opposed to just the player itself. So well wishes out to him. But Brenden, what I like about Queta is he has shown in small spurts. I think he's averaging 1.8 assists per game at the G League level in like 26 minutes. He's shown some ability to be a guy that you can run the offense through like Sabonis. And to me, that's really intriguing, because if you do something crazy, like come back next season and somehow you get to, you retain Davion Jones, and Davion Jones is your true backup center, but you have Neemias Queta developing alongside him. And then if you have stretches where Sabonis is out, I could see where it's not Davion Jones who goes into the starting lineup, but it's Queta who goes into the starting lineup. Davion Jones remains as the number 2 in sort of the anchor on the second minute. His minutes would go up, but Queta is a guy you can run the ball through. He's a different type of big. He's more like, he's not Sabonis. don't like put words in my mouth here. But he's more Sabonis-esque than he is Rashaan Holmes or Damian Jones. Like, he's not a true rim runner. He's really good in the pick and roll, but he doesn't do the high flying, hammer dunks all the time in the pick and roll. He's more of a ground based guy, a big body. He can shoot the ball. He can roll really well. He's got great hands. He can finish around the rim. But what do you want to see from him in this final 9 games?
I think for bigs like him, a lot of it is discipline on the defensive end. Like, just not biting at pump fakes and, not feeling like he needs to block the shot, but just deterring it is enough. And I think that he's good at that, but it's a lot of fouls to me. Like, that's not that Queta has been horrible in that aspect. I think that it's just something that young bigs deal with in a process that they have to go through. Like, and Queta's just dealing with that like anyone else. Like, we still see it with Rashaan Holmes at times. Damian Jones falls into that. Like, Queta averaged just under 4 fouls per game in the 28 and a half minutes he played with Stockton. I think that just being more consistent on that end of the floor is what I'm really looking for, because I'm intrigued in the offensive upside the same way that you kind of just laid out. I think that having a guy that plays the same style of center when they want to run so much of the offense through the bigs on the elbows, like, makes a lot of sense. I thought there were too many times this year where it's like Rashaan Holmes, when he was playing after Sabonis was acquired, was almost looking like he was trying to play like Sabonis, which just isn't his style. And I think that Queta can do that a little bit better. It lets you keep the same type of offense. Like, it's different schematically, but the same way that like Hassan Whiteside makes a lot of sense as a backup for Rudy Gobert, because you don't have to change your scheme at all. You get to stay with the exact same play style. And I think that Queta kind of allows you to do that with Sabonis. The offense is, like I said, interesting. That's where the upside is to me. But I think that the floor of being good with having him out there and the big man that's running alongside some of the other starters if Domas needs to go to the bench is that I just need some consistency on the defensive end, because we've seen the flashes, but just not getting himself in foul trouble, getting used to how quick some of these other big guys are. Like, I want to say one of the games that we saw him most earlier this year, he was playing against Cleveland, and like Jared Allen's first step left Neemias Queta in the dust. So I think that just finding consistency on the defensive end is what I'm going to be mainly looking for at the end of this season, but also going to enjoy the offensive flashes.
You know what I want to see? I want to see him and Trey Lyles just play one-on-one like every day at practice, because Trey Lyles is like the king of the pump fake.
Pump fake to the end of the world. Yeah.
He's going to pump fake you like 7 times every single time, and you're like, whoa, like that you pump faked again and again. Like, I think that's where, like, you can learn from that. You can also learn that a big guy can have a quick step, a big guy can shoot the 3, and you got to stay with him. I think that is like in one-on-one, in 3-man games. That's something I would highly recommend to Queta. And I'll also say this for all the good people in Portugal. I've said this from the beginning. The moment I watched Neemias Queta walk in the room, I could see that he needed a lot of work on his body. And it's not that Neemias Queta is lazy or that he doesn't know how to work out or anything else. What I mean by that is his job is now being a basketball player. It was not. It was being a college student who played basketball. Now he's a professional basketball player. And what comes with that is a professional training staff that builds you from the ground up. And for me, I've watched enough of him. He has improved throughout the season dramatically, but his core strength has to get so much better because he drags around his lower half more than he should. And that's why he's only blocking 1.5 or 1.6 shots per game at the G League level, as opposed to 3 or I think, what do you have, 3.2 at Utah State. This summer is going to be so important for him. If he really dedicates himself and becomes a workout warrior, he can come back with a completely different, redefined body next year that will help him keep up with the Jared Allens of the world. But it's not even the Jared Allens. It's the Davion Mitchells of the world, the De'Aaron Foxes of the world, the quick twitch guys that get to the basket and you want to go block a shot, but you're always late because your body just can't get there in time. So he's a natural shot blocker, which is a spectacular thing because that's not a skill that you can really teach somebody. Either you got it or you don't. But you, at the NBA level, you got to be a super athlete because you're going up against the greatest athletes in the world. They're, like De'Aaron Fox is 6'3", would probably run like a 4.4 40 and has a 38 or 42-inch vert. Like he's a freak of nature, and he's not even the freak of natures in the NBA. And so that's what you're up against. You're up against, 6'9" guys who move like the best guard that you've ever played with at a high school level, or or at the YMCA. I mean, there are good players out there, but just think of those guys that just have all these moves and stuff, and then think of that in a 6'10" guy or a 6'9" guy that can just take you off the dribble, and you're like, what in the world is happening here? There has to be an adjustment, and I think he's making the adjustment, and I kind of wish he would have had a more consistent season as opposed to like bouncing up and down so much and not playing while he was up. But there's still value in going on a 6-game road trip, getting your per diem, figuring out what it's like to bounce from one hotel to the next, figuring out what it's like to try to keep your nutrition, being around the guys, being around the team, the camaraderie, some of the events that they go to, whether they're going to the museums and or some of the other things that they go to, like when they're on the road. These are all things that like I think have been really good for Queta, but I also would have liked to have seen him play like 40 something games at the G League level, which does G League even have 40 games? I don't know.
I'm not quite sure what they get to, but I'm definitely with you. There's the adjustment for himself to the competition level around him, and then, like you said, also his own physical adjustment. Like his freshman year, he was so much more thin than he was right now. He spent 3 years at Utah State. Like there was a process there of him putting on weight, and then also just still learning how to use that weight most optimally, and also still retain his quickness throughout that whole process. Like I think that there is a lot of growth going both ways for Neemias within himself and also just adjusting to the level of play that he's dealing with. So I didn't even, I hadn't given enough thought of like Neemias should really play in this final stretch. And that's something that like I can get excited about. Even if De'Aaron and Domas are not out there, like I could get excited to see 15 minutes of Neemias for these last 9 games.
I totally agree. Okay, so we touch on this every single episode, it feels like, but I think that at this point, the DiVincenzo, Justin Holiday thing, I think we just take it and crumple it up and throw it out the window. And I know that seems weird, but at the same time, like it's kind of where we're at in the season, right?
It's the same conversation. Like,
yeah, and Dante's gonna have to play backup point guard minutes because if Fox is gonna miss the rest of the season, or if he's gonna miss, substantial time here. And again, I don't think there's any reason to bring De'Aaron Fox back. We're seeing teams around the league, especially like Portland. Portland just sits everybody. Everyone is just out. OKC is just the biggest joke of all time. All they do is sit their players out. They have all these first-round picks from other teams, but their own first-round pick is always high because they literally just sit everybody out the whole season. And it doesn't – I don't even know how you grow your team and your franchise and stuff. But I'll also say this when it comes to Justin and Dante. I've been waiting for Dante to have that moment where you're just like, holy cow, he's an NBA starter. He is the guy. He is the fourth of of your building blocks with Fox and Barnes and Sabonis. I haven't seen it. He's had like a couple of nice games, and then he has games where it just nothing is working. And I think that I like him as a player, but I'm still not convinced fully that he's an NBA starter. And I think that we have this issue here with why is he not starting? And I think it's distracted us from, like, I think we all think, oh, the reason why he's not starting is because the Kings are trying to hold his value down, or there, there's some sort of nefarious issue here that we're looking at. And that's possible, but it's also possible that the Kings view him sort of the same way that I'm talking about, where they're like, okay, we're not sure if he's a starter. And if we make him the starter now, does he think he's going to be the starter going forward? And if we get to the offseason and the big swing for the fence we have is not at the small forward or the power forward position, but the big swing comes at the shooting guard spot because that's the big move that we can make. Not that we would choose to make on a normal basis, but if we were going to line up what position we need to fill more, it would probably be stretch forward or the forward position. And you're going to need a replacement for Harrison Barnes, or you're going to need to lock up Harrison Barnes, but you also have to understand he's, just about 30 years old, and you need a long-term answer there. So, but you need a long-term answer at the shooting guard position too. And my concern, which like I've voiced here on the podcast, is that you give Dante DiVincenzo $10 million a year. You got Justin Holiday at $6.3 million a year. You got Terrence Davis at $4 million a year. You're over $20 million at the shooting guard position, and you don't have a starter. That's my concern. And I think DiVincenzo could be a starter. He started on a great team, but he also started along 4 All-Stars. So what does he look like? And I think we wanted to see how it plays out, but at the same time, I think the Kings have kind of like looked at this situation a little differently than we thought they would. They wanted DiVincenzo so bad, but that doesn't mean that they wanted DiVincenzo as their starting shooting guard so bad. We don't know the answer to that at this point. And so I think it's a position where you can improve in the offseason. And that might mean, again, trading Justin Holiday. It could mean trading Terrence Davis. It could be bringing back DiVincenzo on a long-term deal. It could be bringing in someone like Monk, who can shoot the ball really well. But it could also mean like drafting a guy at the shooting guard position. And then what do? Do you lock DiVincenzo up on a 4-year deal and keep him in Sacramento until he's 29 years old with the thought that he might not be a starter or might not be happy the whole time? I think there is some confusion here that needs a little bit more time to kind of root out and kind of figure, like, it's almost like roster building 101. You're trying to see how they're building their roster, and I don't think we know that yet, Brenden.
No, I don't think we do. I think that's the best argument I've heard for DiVincenzo not starting, because my whole issue has been I couldn't figure out a reason not to. And if it's because they're trying to, they feel pretty strongly that he's a 6th man on this team and they wanted to keep him in that role so he understands that's what it's going to be going into next year, then, like, sure. My issue's been that your option ahead of DiVincenzo is Justin Holiday, and I feel pretty confident that DiVincenzo's better than Holiday, even if I don't maybe think that Holiday's as bad as we've seen, that he's a better player than how he's played since he's come to Sacramento. I still think that DiVincenzo's the better option. And I think that, like, to me, DiVincenzo can be the starting 2 long term. I don't think that Holiday can. So when Fox and Sabonis were still out there, I wanted, the same way that I wanted Fox and Sabonis to see their synergy, I wanted to see how DiVincenzo worked alongside them. So without those 2 former players available, if that's what we're looking at here, I understand a little bit less DiVincenzo. What you said definitely makes sense. And I think that I was having this conversation before the Phoenix game. Like, there's a lot of guards on this team still. And really, like, De'Aaron is the only point. And then after that, it's like, how many 2 guards are you working with? Guys that, like, I guess can play the 3, but probably should be a 2. They probably shouldn't really play the 1. Like, Davion, Dante, Terrence Davis, Justin Holiday. There is a chance that you draft somebody like that if you're talking AJ Griffin, Benedict Mathurin. Like, there's a handful of guys that I think kind of would fill that same label. So I see where that's a position that gets tricky. I'm certainly not tied to DiVincenzo as thinking he's the starting two guard of this team, but I think that he could be, and I don't know that I can say that about the other guys that's mentioned there. But I understand that if you do view him as a bench piece, and he's talking about, it's less of the impression that I got when Dante was talking about it, less of like, oh, I think I'm a starter, when he's talking about like, oh, that's what I was comfortable with doing all of last season, and more of like, that's just what I did all of last year. That's what I'm used to. So if the idea is you want him as a bench piece and allow him to get used to that, sure. That makes sense. That's the first argument where I'm like, okay, I see it.
Yeah, and I'll say this, like, I think Davion Mitchell is going to take a couple of years to develop fully as a point guard. And if you had him and Dante DiVincenzo working together in the second unit, both who have point guard skills, but neither one who is a true point guard, then I think that makes sense to me. Like, you need another creator with him on the court. And, I think that's pretty obvious, right?
Yeah, you do. I think that you can get away with those two as your guard alongside Sabonis or HB out there as well to do a little bit more creation. But if that's what you're going with Dante, then go get a better two guard this offseason.
Yeah, and I mean, I bring up Malik Monk because I think, number one, like, you have high-end recruiting ability there because him and De'Aaron Fox were paired together at Kentucky. They're friends. And he shoots the three ball really well, and he doesn't really play outside of himself. He's not a great defender. He's not a great shot creator, but this team just needs more three-point shooting. And the Lakers are going to have a difficult time keeping anyone at this point. The Lakers are a flaming hot mess, and I think they are going to be next season as well. And so it's not like you can't swoop in and steal a guy away like that.
Yeah, and that's coming from someone who covers the Sacramento Kings for 13 years, so that's saying something.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so let's get to the draft. We're gonna have to race through this because we do have some stuff going on today, so neither one of us can stick around long term.
Tuesday overreactions.
Tuesday overreactions.
Benedict Mathurin is the answer.
Benedict Mathurin, the answer. Yeah, you know what? Let's. This is Tuesday overreactions. I think it is because I'm just gonna race through this really quick so people understand. Because I like to spew out the numbers like very quickly. The Kings are now the fifth spot in the lottery. The fifth spot might get decided on Wednesday night because they're playing the team that they're tied with in the win column. So the Kings have 25 wins right now. The Indiana Pacers have 25 wins. The Kings got lucky the other night because Portland decided to win a game, so now they're up to 27 wins. I don't know if the Kings are going to try to get up to 27 wins. I also think Portland does not want to win any more games, but they might sneak in one more win. But it gives you a little bit of a buffer. If the Kings lose to Indiana, that means they are the fifth spot. If Indiana and the Kings tie at the end of the season, that means that they split their percentages, and then there's a coin flip to see who is actually the fifth and the sixth spot, which is actually a huge coin flip because if you're the sixth spot, you cannot get the fifth pick. If you can only get 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. If you're the fifth spot, you can get 1 through 5. You can get 6, 7, 8, 9, I think it is. But let's just run through the percentages. If you're the fifth spot in the draft, you have a 10.5% chance at the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 4. You have a 42% chance of landing in the top 4. Here's a weird one. You only have a 2.2% chance of being the fifth pick. So that means there's only a 2.2% chance that the top 4 picks in the NBA draft will all go in the top 4. They don't have to go in that same order, but the 4 can be 1 and 2 can be 3 and 3 can be 2 and 1 can be 4. Like whatever it is, like that can happen, but the fifth spot is huge because you have a 19.6% chance of falling to number 6. You have a 26.7% chance of falling to number 7. So basically, you're really looking at a top 7 pick and even a really good chance of being a top 4 pick. This draft, that means a ton. But I also think that there's two tiers. I think that there's three tiers in the top. I think there's one tier that's Chet Holmgren and Jabari Smith. Just my own personal agreement, my own personal look. I think there's a second tier which is Paolo Banchero, and it's possible that Jaden Ivey slides into that tier. And then I think that there's a third tier right there, and I'm gonna say it: AJ Griffin and Ben Mathurin are my top six, and that can be our Tuesday overreaction.
I like it. I have Keegan Murray in that same group, but I do like Mathurin better. I'm still, definitely not locking anything in with these guys. I'm gonna be diving a lot deeper as we go further here. Like Jalen Duren had a really good 2 games at the tournament. Johnny Davis is playing well. I think that there's, Tari Eason with LSU. I think there's other guys
that him.
could.
Yeah.
There's other guys that could totally kind of jump into this group, but I'm with you where I would be thrilled with any of your 6. I'd be pretty happy with Keegan Murray also. There's a couple guys even after what's viewed as the top of the draft. I think the top 4 is what's talked about a lot, but yeah, there's 2, 3, 4 guys after that I would feel pretty good about, and I could not help but get really excited about Ben Mathurin in those couple games, and made me dive into him a lot more, and especially the dunk that he had was cutting off of a post up. I was like, man, this is the easiest thing to picture ever. This is Domantas Sabonis.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you why, in my opinion, I don't have Keegan Murray in the top 10. I don't even have him in. He's probably number 12 when I really break it down. I like Keegan Murray, and I think he can be a really solid NBA player. And I think his floor is probably pretty high. I don't think he's going to be a player that can bust. I think, he's probably looking at Sadiq Bey-esque with the potential to be a little bit better than that offensively. I don't think he can be as good defensively as Sadiq Bey, but I think he can still be solid. That is a player in my mind that goes between picks 12 and 18. And maybe I'm wrong, but watching him disappear and flame out in the NCAA tournament was exactly what I was worried about. It's that there are games where he completely disappears. And there are moments where he disappears in games where you're sitting there wondering, how in the world did this guy get to 32 points? Because I remember him hitting a bunch of threes early, but then I don't remember him doing much of anything else. And it's just kind of a weirdness about certain players where they don't. I mean, it is a little bit Harrison Barnes-esque, right? Now, when I watch Mathurin, I think, holy cow, that guy's a dog. That guy doesn't care. He's going to get in somebody's face. He's going to jump over the top of somebody and hammer a ball down. He has the personality. He has the ceiling. So I think that Keegan Murray's ceiling is low. I don't think he can be an all-star. Maybe I'm wrong. I think he can be a solid rotational player, maybe a starter. I don't see plus starter, but I can see him being a really solid NBA player. Mathurin could bust. He could also be an all-star. He has incredible athleticism. His personality is crazy. He wants to go out and punk you. And that's something the Kings need. And I think if you look at AJ Griffin, you're looking a little bit like that. If you look at Jaden Ivey, again, that dude is going to do something spectacular on the court every single time, every single night. He will do something that makes you go, I can't believe I just saw that. Now, will he make a bunch of mistakes? Will he ever develop into a guy that you can depend on a high-end rotational player on a high-end playoff team? I don't know. There's possibility that he's just wild and crazy and does these fiendish things all the time, but it never equates. It's not consistent. It's not good enough.
It's very Harrison Barnes and Dante DiVincenzo. It's kind of, I'm not saying exact comps, and obviously because we're just talking about Kings players, but it's the there is an upside here, but also questionable downside. And then, not saying that like Keegan will be Harrison Barnes level, but it's the same type of thing where that upside isn't there, but then the worst nights aren't quite as bad.
Yeah. I enjoy watching both of them. I like all of them. All of them. I enjoy watching all of them. Even Keegan Murray, I enjoy watching him. So, yeah, I mean, I get it. I see the upside. I see the positivity here. But okay, so that's gonna get us to the business of basketball. We're gonna run these two things in together because we're pressed for time. The business of basketball. Brenden, are you a best player available or best fit? Because in all honesty, I think that's what we're talking about right here.
The way that I always do it is I have my tiers, and I'm fine with going with fit if they're in the same tier, but I'm never going down a tier for the sake of fit. Like Davion Mitchell, I would not have gone with because he just wasn't in the same tier as some of these other guys for me, like Moses Moody, Alperen Şengün, Zaire Williams. But I like Keegan Murray and Mathurin and one other I'm forgetting, like AJ Griffin. One of them might end up in a tier higher than the others, and one of them would be Griffin or Mathurin. I don't think that I'll end up bumping up Murray, but that's kind of how I am. If my tiers will be pretty well defined, like maybe for the sake of putting them out, they're a little bit wider, but there's maybe even half tiers inside of those where I wouldn't reach down for the sake of fit. But if I view two guys somewhat similarly, and then I'm taking fit into account. And that's if you're picking fifth. Like if you're 1 or 2, I could give a damn about fit.
Oh no, I mean if you're looking at 1 and 2 and they're in the same tier, and one of them is considered way above the other, you take the one that's way better. But if they're both considered like like a coin toss, which I think these guys might be at the end of the day, between Chet and Jabari, if they're a coin toss, then I'm gonna go fit because if it's a coin toss, and I'll just say, look, I think that if you are able to add certain pieces to the Sacramento Kings, then the best fit player, if you're like at number 7 or if you're number 6, it might be Keegan Murray. But you have to add so many other things for that one piece to make sense with this specific roster. And so that's where I ignore fit and I go straight up. I agree with you. Like if you got 3 players that you kind of believe are around the same talent level, I'm going fit within that, right? But I'm not going to stretch for fit.
Yeah. And it's mainly that, like, the way that fit gets in the way to me is if there's a clearly bad fit. Like, I'm more so worried about poor fits rather than I am, like, attracted to good fits when we're having that conversation.
I agree. It's like a Banchero. Like, he will not, I don't think, will be a good fit at all with De'Aaron Fox and with Sabonis. Like, is that stupid to pass on him at number 3 if somehow you end up at number 3 and take someone else? Maybe. But I still don't see the fit. Like, if it's not going to work, it's not going to work.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm definitely with you. Like, if there's a guy that's only a point guard, like Ty Washington, like, haven't dug into him enough. But guys like that where it's like, I don't think this is just a bad fit to me. That's different than Benedict, like Keegan Murray's a better fit than Mathurin because of DiVincenzo Holiday, like, and those guys, like that matters less to me for sure.
Okay. All right. Do you have any final quick thoughts?
I think that this Indiana game is weirdly hilarious how much it matters, and it matters because we're both trying to lose games. Like, I will be disappointed if we don't see Fox and Tyrese, which I would guess that we don't, but I would have loved to have seen that. And can we, I think we've had this conversation off record. This is probably one of our waiting for De'Aaron or Dante conversations, but who scores more, Tyrese Halliburton or Buddy Hield?
I think Ty does.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's ever been a big game that Buddy Hield ever showed up for. Yeah. Like, I watched him play for years, and every single time there was a big game where you needed a big night from Buddy Hield, He wasn't there. 1 for 5. 1 for 8 from three. Almost every single time there was any type of pressure. And I think this is pressure. This is Buddy wants to. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he'll just catch fire and just light the Kings up. All right, we got to cut
this. Be on the other side of it.
Yeah. All right, so we got to cut this one short. Number one, make sure to jump on board with the Kings Beat. If you are a premium subscriber, you get an invite to Thursday's happy hour. It's going to be a blast. Scott Moak will be there. If you're not, you will not get the invite. Number two, give us a thumbs up. Give us a subscription to here on YouTube. Merch shop is wide open and like some awesome stuff in there. Jump on board there. Outside of that, we'll be back on Thursday. We'll break down some of this stuff long before the happy hour happens. And we'll get the ball rolling a little bit more on draft coverage as we look for this weekend's tournament stuff that's going to heat up. Should be a lot of fun. So for Brenden, Nunes from the Kings Herald and the Kings Pulse podcast, I am James Ham, your Kings insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. See you in a couple of days.